What's up, everybody? I'm Stan, and welcome to Detail Comics, where we go over comics in detail. This is Shovel Peel, the weekly show where I go over the comic books that I picked up this week, give you my impressions, and let you know whether there's something to go back to the shop for or not. So make sure you subscribe to get one of these every single Wednesday. The first book that I really want to talk about is Justice League number 34. So Justice League number 34 is actually playing a pretty huge part in my understanding of the Justice League, simply because I wasn't a huge fan of Brian Hitch's run as the writer on Justice League, and this is the debut issue for Christopher Priest as well as the new artist on it. And what we find is we find Simon Baz, he's, off-world, he's in this colony. There's kind of a distinction between all the various characters. The members of the Justice League aren't necessarily one cohesive unit all the time, where we've seen them mostly. This is really the assembly and the process by which the Justice League handles various things. So what the Justice League needs to deal with is what appears to be some sort of alien invasion that's about to happen, as well as an earthquake off the coast of the city, and then a hostage situation as well. So they're trying to tackle all three things at once, and ultimately things go wrong. And who takes, not necessarily the blame, but who feels like they bear the responsibility, the brunt of everything? It's Batman, because he is the commander-in-chief. He is the one he's the coach for this team of superheroes, and ultimately this is going to be exposing, the limitations of Batman, as well as how the team operates with and without this character in command. So I'm really excited to see where this one goes. Definitely something that I feel is worthwhile for the pickup. It might start off a little weird, especially if somebody's coming from the previous run of Justice League, so definitely keep that in mind when you read it. Next, I want to talk about The Fix number 10. So this is a glorious return for The Fix, and if you don't remember, what we have is a situation where essentially you have two corrupt police officers, one that really likes dogs and his partner was just shot. Pretzels is in intensive care going through her rehabilitation, and then you have another cop who's trying to sell a screenplay and make it big in Hollywood. That's what he's really doing here. You've got corruption all over the place. You've got all these various other avenues. So your corrupt police officer is selling the sex toys of a now deceased celebrity that he inadvertently or purposefully orchestrated the actual death of. There's a lot of really weird stuff going on, so there's a mix of really dark humor. It's actually mostly dark humor that goes along with it, so I find that particularly entertaining. It might not necessarily be for everybody, and it's really hard because there was such a large break between the Fix number 9 and the Fix number 10 that really kind of it's going to force me to go back and check these books out again just to make sure that I'm up on the current continuity. It doesn't feel as entertaining as it was the first time, but I think that's just because I was out of sync with the storytelling because of the long hiatus. So I'm going to go back and see where I think it's going to be now, and that'll determine whether I'm going to recommend it in future preview picks or not. Of course, a book that it looks like I'm going to keep recommending is Captain America. So Captain America 696. This is more of the same of what we got in the first issue, because if you're looking for an individual, isolated story told in one singular issue, you found it. So Captain America is still making his way through the heartland of America into rural America, specifically comes upon what appears to be a diner in Georgia where he goes in to just get some food. Ultimately, he draws far too large a crowd. He tries to negotiate for, instead of getting all of this stuff for free, he's just like, hey, can I wash dishes or something like that to pay for this food that you're going to give me? And the guy's like, can I take a picture? And, sure, yeah, no. Okay, one dish. So it's kind of him connecting with these average Americans and then ultimately helping save the day when it comes to those things, especially since the swordsman comes to attack him. This is still a case where this version of Steve Rogers feels like he's just been pulled out of time and he doesn't necessarily know a lot of the history that came along before him. So it's really intriguing to see where it's just like, predecessor versus current day. He's taking on this vibranium sword. He uses his might, his superhero strength to kind of save the day, closing out this spillway valve for the dam. It's just a very simple, single-issue story that really gets back to the heart of Captain America. It's definitely a refresher. I really hope that there's more development after we get through this first reintroduction to the character, so that way we can kind of move him forward. There was a lot of really interesting character development, not necessarily all positive, from Nick Spencer, so I don't want to necessarily see us just hit the reset button and go back to, bland and boring. I want it to be interesting. Captain America needs to be interesting in order to stay relevant. So definitely something I'm going to keep reading, but I can see how some people might get tired of this kind of thing unless this is what they're really yearning for. Next, we want to talk about one of the big decisions of the week, and that is Superman. Will he become the Lord of Apokolips and take up the throne of Darkseid? And we get the answer. So, we've got this really kind of interesting battle that takes place. You got John riding in on these hellhounds. You've got the female Furies and Lois kind of coming in here. You've got Caliban going up against, Granny Goodness. You've got Superman kind of fighting in this. And ultimately, there's this kind of really interesting plot line with Lex Luthor, who's incapacitated and pretty much completely useless, especially until the end of the story. So it's just really about the Superman family and what's right according to Superman's sense of justice and right about what his sense of right and wrong really is, and how after his victory on Apokolips and his acceptance of the throne that once held Darkseid, a despot of a ruler of Apokolips, his instilling of these values to these Apokoliptians, I think Apokoliptians, I'll call them that. So his values kind of being imparted to these folks, it's probably not going to hold, but it's with the best of intentions. The prophet seems to think that he's got the same, Apokolips has the same kind of hope, and the same kind of chance that Earth does. I might not necessarily agree with him on that one because, Superman's going to be an absentee ruler. It's just like, yay, we liberated Apokolips, and then we're back to Earth. So there's very little consequences going to come out of this story unless Peter J. Tomasi picks up where this ran off, or, somebody else does anything with those things. It's just... It's like, yep, feel good, let's get back to what we're good at, Earth. And then you've got the twist with Lex Luthor at the end. So it's definitely something that, Superman has a series has not let me down, but it doesn't necessarily this didn't quite pack the punch that I was really hoping for, which is unfortunate, but we're going to lead into the Super Sons of Tomorrow, which is going to really focus on Jonathan Kent a little bit more, as well as Damian Wayne, and Peter J. Tomasi really writes those characters well, so I'm kind of excited to see where that one goes too, so it doesn't have me off Superman anytime soon. Definitely something that I recommend, but I can see why some people might not necessarily find it the most entertaining thing. Of course, there is a book that you're going to probably find pretty entertaining, because I found it really entertaining, and that's Doctor Strange. So Doctor Strange number 382 is... yeah. it's yeah. So there's a lot of stuff going on in this one. A lot of stuff that I'm not necessarily going to ruin for you guys, but we see... Doctor Strange go to some lengths. First off, we get a little bit of backstory, not a lot of detail, not a lot of backstory on why Doctor Strange is currently employed as a veterinarian at his own clinic, and how he runs off his customers with the explanation of why a basset hound is talking to him in English. So it's just one of those really interesting things. It's a really great scene that Donny Cates captures. I really like G.H. Walt's art, and I really want to go into this a lot more detail so that way I can kind of flesh out some of the concepts that really go along with this. So it's definitely something that I recommend people picking up. If you're a fan of Doctor Strange, this is a very different take on that, but it's no less than what Jason Aaron did with that, and it's setting up a really interesting perspective. I'm really excited to see where this goes, and I'm really interested in Doctor Strange. Ever since Doctor Strange number 1, I've been on it, except for the tie-ins to, Secret Empire. But this, yeah, I'm on board for Donny Cates and G.H. Walt's version of Doctor Strange. It's just great for me. The next book I want to dig into has a little bit more intimate storyline, and that's Batman number 36. So I haven't mentioned it yet, but just look at the covers, like now that we don't have the DC Rebirth logo, there's a lot more art that's available to it, and it feels like it's not quite as compressed, so I'm just really a fan of the way these covers look. But Batman 36 starts off the Super Friends arc, which is really telling the story of how Batman, Bruce Wayne, is going to relate to his friends, how he's going to tell them about the relationship that he's having with Selina Kyle, and where it's kind of come to at this point in time. As far as this issue goes, I think that Tom King did a really fantastic job in explaining why these two characters act in the ways that they do, because we've got a very distinct perspective between the both of them. They're coming from two very different places, however, they have both reached similar conclusions. It just shows how close and how relatable they are as characters, how they're kind of just two sides of the same coin, and not necessarily in a positive and a negative direction, just in a different approach to the same thing. So it's really, I really like it. Again, I continue to be a fan of Tom King's run. I really enjoy Clay Mann on this book. I mean, we are just going to have to take a moment to salute what he does with Catwoman and the action in these scenes. I just really love the composition. Jordi Belair did a fantastic job on the coloring. So there's some really interesting choices in it that I can get into in a review. But overall, Batman 36 is a start to a great arc. Over the next 5 issues, we're going to get 2 issues of Super Friends, starting with 36, a break for the origin of Bruce Wayne, Batman, as well as, 2 more issues dealing with Wonder Woman at the end of this, leading up to issue number 40. So definitely an A+ for me. Well, not necessarily an A+, but definitely something that I'd recommend you guys go grab. Batman is a must-buy book every single week. Now let's dive into new number ones, and I have Batman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 2. This is written by James Tynion IV, and this is a continuation of the first Batman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles crossover that we did. And Batman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was a lot of childhood nostalgia that was just a whole hell of a lot of fun. You know, you had Shredder as the main villain who was teaming up with Ra's al Ghul. You had all these anthropomorphic animal versions of these, you know, like these hybrid versions of Batman's villains, and everything was taking place in Gotham, and it was fantastic. So what we see is now we're back in New York, both heroes, you know, sets of heroes, you know, Batman and Robin as well as the Ninja Turtles. They're both separated and dealing with their own kind of situations, and what we run into is Donnie's feeling a little bit weak. And in the weakness of the moment, he goes back to the technology that brought the Turtles to Gotham and then brought them back from Gotham in turn. And there's a lot of interior discussion and development that goes on between the characters, you know, particularly amongst the Turtles with April and you know, there's a lot of history that they're catching up on inside these worlds, but the core to it is the freedom of Bane and what a threat he's going to pose to New York City, as well as all the inhabitants, whether they're, you know, good or bad people, is very real. It's a very real threat that ultimately Batman, Robin, and the Turtles are going to have to team up to take down. So I'm really interested in where it goes. I wouldn't necessarily say excited. You know, I had a really good time with the first run, and then to dive back into it, I'm like, yeah, okay, it's okay. So it's something you might want to check out, but I can totally understand if it's not quite your cup of tea. So the next new number one that I want to talk about is Jupiter Jet. So Jupiter Jet is a really interesting book. It's written by Jason Inman and Ashley V. Robinson, and it's from Action Lab, and that's the first Action Lab title that I really ever picked up, and I'm really excited about this book simply because of the vast undertaking that took place in order to get this book to print and put everything together. So I'm really excited for Jason and Ashley. They put together a story that is acceptable and entertaining for all audiences. It's a very distinct flavor. It creates its own small world, you know, due to the lingo, the style. There's some running gags that kind of go in there regarding a man and his walking dog. You've got this really kind of this protagonist who's not necessarily I wouldn't necessarily consider her sharp. You know, she's got all the best intentions, but she is a little bit on the slower side when it comes to the uptake. You know, she always wants to feel like the hero, which is why she's kind of drawn to this. Her younger brother is obviously the brains of the bunch. You know, he has the ability to kind of create and modify and take care of these various mechanical things like her jetpack and create parachute dresses and all this kind of fun stuff that's really geared more towards a younger audience, but can still be entertaining for experienced readers of comic books. So I'm really excited for Jason and Ashley. I'm really glad that this book made it to print and that I had a chance to pick it up. It's just a lot of fun in a very, you know, friendly package for a lot of different readers. So it's definitely something I recommend you guys check out if you have the opportunity. You may have thought that I missed this one, but Batman White Knight number 3 came out. So Batman White Knight continues to be one of my favorite DC books coming out. It's an Elseworld story. It deals with a very different style of Batman. It definitely is going to touch on the themes that are associated with Batman, loss, control, these kind of things that he's going to stretch kind of far beyond. And the way that everything's really portrayed, the kind of genius that the Joker puts into his various plots and plans, especially coming from that last few pages where he reveals his ultimate motivations when it comes to the use of these particular villains, you know, the overall scope of villains inside Gotham. The introduction of the Batman Disaster Fund is very interesting. I mean, I'm going to have to do a full review on this one in order to dive a little bit deeper into everything that's going on, but I mean, the introduction of this new character, there's just a lot to dig into, so I can't wait to talk a little bit more about that. Definitely something that you must buy. There are 2 covers for it. I got both, but I do really enjoy the dual Harley Quinn variant cover that he put out. It's fantastic. And then to finish things off, let's talk about Marvel Legacy Venom Inc. So Venom Inc. is taking place over the course of Amazing Spider-Man, Venom Inc Alpha, Amazing Spider-Man Venom, and then a Venom Inc Omega. And this is dealing with the symbiotes almost as a whole. So where we open up, we're not even dealing with Venom at this point in time. We're dealing with the offspring of Venom. So we're dealing with Mania, and then she's ultimately besieged by these various villains who are there to take her symbiote. We flash over to Flash. Flash over to Flash. So we flash over to Flash, and then him and Peter are in this kind of conversation. He's looking to reclaim what he knew once as a friend, a great ally, and a war for good inside space. You've got Eddie Brock, who's got a very different kind of perspective on these things, and ultimately they end up in Alchemac. There's so much going on, but I like the way that everything's set up. I mean, overall, Ryan Stegman's a fantastic artist in my mind when it comes to Spider-Man, so I can't wait to see what he does with this, but he's only going to be doing the art for the Amazing Spider-Man books and the Alpha and the Omega. So you might not necessarily find him inside the Venom books, and this is co-written between Dan Slott and Mike Costa. So I'm not sure how the tones are going to shift between those two writers. So Venom Inc Alpha #1, for me, I just love seeing Flash and Eddie and Peter, these hosts of the Venom symbiote at some point in time, just kind of together and moving forward. There's this other person that's kind of in play, which I think that we know who it is. But I'm going to do a full review on this one, so definitely something that I recommend you guys check out, especially if you're a Spider-Man fan, especially if you're a Venom fan. It's probably going to be one of the better Venom stories that's come out in recent memory. So those are my thoughts on the comic books that I picked up, but I want to know what you guys think too, so hit me up in the comments down below so we can start that conversation. As always, if you like what you see, hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe to get more news, reviews, and commentary on comic books, comic book movies, comic book TV shows and games, and anything and everything inside the world of comics.